All right, we're back. I missed everybody, actually. I feel like I was doing so many of these back to back. The Manifestor mindset took a little bit of a break. It's been a few days, but I'm back, and I'm back here with a special guest. A few things before I get into that. This new functionality on StreamYard, which I love, which now enables me to see any of the comments on the right-hand side. So if you have questions as we talk for a bit, love to throw those up on the screen, whereas before I couldn't see it before. So if you see me keeping one eye to the right, it's because I'm trying to pay attention and grab those. So I'm so excited today to have my partner. So to be clear, I'm completely biased. I have not a shred of objectivity about the guest that we're about to have on. I'm completely conflicted, selfishly motivated because I love coffee very much. I live for the smell of coffee beans, and I love a great, flat white. And so those things came together with RSE investing in Bluestone Lane a couple of years ago now, which we'll get into. But I have with me the founder of Bluestone Lane, Nick Stone. He is from Melbourne, not Sydney. You don't confuse that because the two cities get very resentful of that. So from Melbourne. And Nick has a pretty incredible story. He was an athlete, which I'll let him get into, Australian rules football, and eventually became a banker and made the transition to becoming the improbable executive of a nationwide coffee cafe, incredible food. And it's just extraordinary to watch Nick iterate throughout the course of his life. Clearly, he's also a model and a cyborg because no one could look this perfectly without being genetically engineered. So we're going to get into all that, Nick, and make you feel very uncomfortable. But first, I want to welcome Nick Stone. Great to have you.
Matt, thank you. Thank you. And it's been a great journey since partnering with yourself and the RSE team and Steve for the last couple of years. And
what I did, by the way, I just want to show you that I illegally appropriated your trademark.
There you go. See, I brought my own brand,
No, see, I was Nick was complaining that I wasn't doing enough to promote my own coffee and drinking generic coffee. So I don't like your precious cups. So Sarah went and made my own mug. So slightly off brand, but it works, right?
It looks good though. I like the different color inside. That's
right?
Very aesthetically pleasing.
We thought if I was going to steal your IP, I was going to do it with some elegance, and I think it worked out well. So
you can thank Sarah for that.
Exactly. Nick, let's for those who don't know, let's get into a little bit of your story. Take us back to Australia and just your athletic career, and when did you become obsessed with coffee?
Sure. Well, as you sort of outlined, began my professional career in 1999 when I was in final year of high school. In year 12, I got selected in the national draft, and I had a bit of a turbulent journeyman career. I played 2 seasons at 3 teams, so 6 seasons professionally. So I was finished at the age of 23. So
were you good? I never asked you. Were you good objectively? Like what?
I was good enough to stay in the system 6 years.
Right.
I think what I really lacked was the self-belief that you could perform at the elite stage. And I think what's amazing about elite teams, and you've seen this up and personal with the Jets and the Dolphins, is you may have this very similar skill set and very similar athletic attributes, but just the ability to execute when it matters is the difference between a mediocre average player like I was professionally versus a champion. And what was incredible is that at training, like I could beat a really accomplished player easily, but then I couldn't unfortunately put it all together professionally. So luckily I studied at university the whole time. So I did a 3-year bachelor degree in banking and finance and did it part-time over 6 years. So when footy finished, I proceeded to go straight into corporate finance, investment banking. I was always excited about the opportunity to work overseas and understand how companies grow and build a brand.
Let me pause on that for a second, because I did an amazing talk yesterday with or a couple of days ago with a bunch of players from from Jacksonville Jaguars actually, and this is an enlightened group of players who say they want to go ahead and they want to learn more and take advantage of the crisis to basically enrich themselves, right? But not every athlete adopts that mindset. They believe life is lived concurrently, right? They wait till their career is over before they figure what the hell I'm going to do. What made you pursue finance simultaneously? Like, was it an awareness that this was going to run out eventually, or I'm curious?
Yeah, I think it was a combination. Firstly, my family always were very realistic that if you have a great career, it's 10 years, then where's the utility going to come from? Forget about the money. And AFL is nowhere near paid as lucratively as an NFL or NBA. But like, what are you going to do for utility? Let's say your career finishes at 30. What are you going to do for the next 40, hopefully 50, 60 years? And that was, particularly, you know, drilled into me at a very young age. And my friends were reinforcing because they were all going to university and had these different ideas and career aspirations. And I guess I really enjoyed also juggling two things at once. And if I look at everything I've achieved since I was in 1999, I went to university and played football at the same time. Then I did banking and I did my master's and MBA at the same time. And then I did banking and Bluestone at the same time. And then finally jumped full time into Bluestone in mid 2016. And
Well,
I got married. So that was
married too, right? Zan, hello, Zan. Little shout out to you if you're she's watching. Right? Got the most amazing wife, spectacularly beautiful, and takes care of the kids and deals with all of our madness. But so wait, you come to New York, big bad city, right? You assume you're alone or you're figuring things out, right? When did you start yearning for your Melbourne coffee, and what makes Melbourne coffee culture so special?
So I came in late 2010. Alexandra had already got a job ahead of me. I was trying to get transferred with my bank, but the financial crisis was making that really challenging. And at the time, I was interviewing in New York and London. She decided she was studying osteopathic medicine, but she was modeling part-time in Australia as a hobby job. And she met with a few agencies. And when I came home in 2009, they said, Nick, you're not going. There's no need for anyone who works in corporate finance or M&A over here. And then Alexandra gets a letter in the mail from Ford Agency saying, we want you to come over. We sign you for 3 years. Here's the visa. So I found my way and iterated again, another pivot to get to New York as part of my MBA. I wanted to do an exchange, and that was going to act as the catalyst for me to land, study, build up my network, and hopefully find a job. And I was very fortunate that just before I transferred, the bank I worked for 10 years, Australian New Zealand Banking Group, ANZ, said, actually, the Aussie banks have done pretty well during the financial crisis. We haven't had this big asset price and mortgage bubble and asset price depreciation. We've now got this huge flight to quality. They had 4 of the 9 AA rated banks in the world. We're actually going to start growing again. And we really want to build up our institutional franchise. And Nick, we want you to have this opportunity to go and build a team in London and New York. So I went across in 2010 and was studying. And I did a course that focused heavily on venture capital. And it was a postgraduate certificate whereby you could only apply and get into this program if you already had an MBA or another postgraduate degree. So my peer group was typically aged from, say, 38 to 48. They were seasoned, in many cases, seasoned executives that had a lot of experience. It was absolutely wonderful and so different from what I did in my undergraduate and other postgraduate studies, where you have people of very similar age, very similar experience. And this was on another tangent. You're talking about people who are running big business already, employing hundreds of people, and had real pragmatic and relevant skills. I absolutely loved it. But what was so amazing was when we used to go for our breaks and start the morning or in the afternoon, people used to talk about going get a coffee. And I used to ask them, but you going, which coffee shop do you go to? Where's your local? And they say, local? No, we just go get a coffee. And that is so different from the way it is in Australia. Australia is the land of independence. It's the market where Starbucks failed. Pete's isn't there. Tim Hortons not there. Costa Coffee's not there. Dunkin' is not there. It's a very, very sophisticated independent model. And the way in which people socialize has transitioned in some cases from the yesteryear of the pub on the corner to now coffee and catching up and using it as a way to facilitate more deeper and more friendly interactions. And that's the way that we used to start and finish our day every day working in banking as a team. We'd go to our local where the barista knew your name, face, and order.
You wouldn't go to your local Starbucks? That doesn't count, Nick? Well,
there was no Starbucks. And secondly, we're conditioned to go into our local where they know your name, face, and order. They make you feel recognized and special. And I saw that was really lacking. And it was part of it due to the phenomenal success of Starbucks. And as you would know, I'm such a huge admirer of what they've achieved. And I do believe they're the greatest hospitality company the world's ever known. And Schultz did it in a way that is so pioneering. But through their own success, they had commodified the getting coffee journey. And it wasn't really about an experience. It wasn't really about human connection. It was about fulfillment and getting someone a transaction. And I thought there must be an opportunity here, even though I'd never worked a single day in hospitality. And this is my first hospitality experience and job whatsoever.
So you're sitting with it. So you have a banker mentality, right? So you're in finance. So you must have done your research and know that this isn't like a quick flip if you're going to get into any kind of food, fast casual. For those of you out there who don't know the business, like there's no, one of the things I love about it is just how hard it is to scale the business. This isn't like creating Snapchat. Not that that's easy, but there's an opportunity for a digital product to obviously explode. And next thing you know, it's a unicorn. There are no overnight unicorns in the food business. So putting on your finance hat, you knew that you were signing up for a very, very long slog if you were going to follow this passion, right?
Yeah, I think I knew that it could be elongated, but I knew there was tremendous access to capital. There was a lot of M&A activity. The consumer that was driving this premium adoption was young and valued it, and it was primarily squarely focused on millennials. And what I observed is Schultz, since the late 80s, had built a $110 billion market cap company, a company that does $24 billion in revenue. Now, we can talk about all the tech unicorns and that they're worth $1 billion or what have you, but not many do $20 billion in revenue in 30 years. There's some, absolutely, and they dominate. They dominate the stock market now, the FANG, but very few. And I thought, isn't it amazing that they've achieved it in a sort of reasonably capital-intensive way, a certainly very human capital-intensive way. But when I looked at the peer group and I looked at who's a competitor, Starbucks had about a $95 billion moat. And that is just mind-blowing to think that if Starbucks number one and Dunkin' was number two, worth $6 billion, there must be opportunity here to fit in between. And I also thought that there was a tremendous opportunity by bringing this focus on health, wellness, and this Australian sort of lifestyle mentality and brand that was going to have a really great run in the US off the back of this greater awareness around balance and health and dealing with the externalities of poor eating and obesity-related illness. And also the fact that the rise of the East, China and Southeast Asia, and that Australia and New Zealand are really the premium food bowl, and in many cases, the aspirational lifestyle for those communities. I thought that together, combined with the power of the brand of New York, we could have an opportunity to develop something to scale.
So you had this epiphany is beginning to cultivate inside of you, right? Or you begin awareness and awakening, right? And then desire is cultivating. But then how do you overcome it's not your industry? Like, right? I mean, most people will stop at that threshold, right? And say, I find they erect barriers to their own next step. They'll say, I need an expert, or I need somebody. Take us. I want to understand the birth of the first Bluestone Lane.
Well, there was a few years between when I started to kick around the idea in late 2010 from when we opened our first store in mid 2013. And we talk about this quite a bit. And I do think we share alignment in this philosophy around startups and entrepreneurs that I'm not huge in glorifying failure. I don't think that you need to take unnecessary risk. And that's why in many cases I've hedged my bets. So I played footy and studied. I studied in banking. But the way I get comfortable with things in life, the way my brain works, is I love analyzing. I love data. I love points that really validate the way my gut feels. And in the case of Bluestone, I became a student. I became a student of the industry. I reached out to as many people as I possibly knew. I read as many books. I sat hundreds of hours in cafes. I had certainly heavily experienced and influenced from the type of culture I was going to be influenced by in Melbourne, and I could relate to that very directly. But I became a student, and that's one of my big pieces of advice to entrepreneurs that ask me, like, how did you get started? I said, like, what you start to do is you look objectively at your value proposition. You look objectively at everything that could go wrong, and you try and put in place some mitigants. And I think over time, you realize that you get a lot of comfort given the fact that if this doesn't work, then I can address it this way. If this doesn't work, I can pivot this way. And over time, I think I had more positive indicators that this could work than negative. So I started and launched with one, funded, had 3 friends who I worked with put in money, and then I put in sort of 60% of the money. And then we did 2 stores, and then it really started from there.
The first one was on Greenwich. Is 55 Greenwich your first, or is it Wall Street your first?
The first one was actually 805 3rd Avenue. Subterranean basement, no street visibility, underneath an escalator that was frequently broken. So you had to find it through word of mouth. And I think that laid the foundation for the brand, that we weren't about promotion or advertisement. We were about this alluring, almost secret sort of coffee shop that was very hard to find and was driven through word of mouth. And we were very fortunate that we had a lot of Australians that were really passionate about their premium cafe culture and that social element, that they were our ambassadors. They were the tastemakers, and they brought their US friends to experience it. So the first day we opened, I think we sold like nearly 600 to 800 coffees day one. And this is a 200 square foot box. And, then we did the one, we did a Broad Street next to the Stock Exchange. And then the third one, which really took us to the next level, was certainly Greenwich, 55 Greenwich Avenue, what we called Collective Cafe. And we got a number of elements right there, even though we had no idea on how to run it. We had certainly some very influential people walk in and really project it to the next stratosphere, I would say. And yeah.
So Nick, I believe that this is master of the obvious, but I'm going to state it anyway, right? That this COVID period is going to usher in phenomenal innovation, not for reasons that people talk about a lot, telemedicine and so forth. I actually think because the bar to execution and implementation was lowered dramatically, and that you now can create a startup out of your own room. No one expects that you have office space. In fact, having that space might be folly, right? And now you can get decision makers and investors to pay attention to you on a Zoom call. So you don't have to get on an airplane, and you could hire people remotely. You can have an entire remote workforce. Those are dramatic sea changes in how we operate. And so there's a bunch of people out there probably watching this or watching it down the road who are going to look to start something, right? Which is exciting, a whole new wave of entrepreneurs. So question for you is, give me just like 1 or 2 cringe-worthy mistakes that you made in those early days so you can spare somebody else the pain that you went through, in those first 6 months.
Yeah, I think great question. I think one of the key things is you got to pick your partners. I think you got to be really careful with who you go into business with, particularly if you've come up with the idea and you're going to give it everything you got. I think you need partners who can have the resilience and the fortitude to get through it. I think a lot of people, it seems like a convenient idea to partner up with a friend or someone you met, and they've got a slight alignment in the same idea. But if you don't get that right, it causes an enormous amount of headache. I think the second thing that we would, I think back and whether we got it right or not, it's proof's in the pudding over the next couple of years. But I think you want to be careful about going too wide. I think you want to build your core foundation of your business so strong before you start diversifying in new products, diversifying in new geographies. I think, if in COVID has certainly brought everything to the forefront and all your strategic decisions over the last couple of years, because you're often dealing with liquidity issues and other sort of business disruption. But, I think that's a really key one as well. Like, get your core base, have a solid revenue stream or a profit engine, a cash cow, which you can then diversify into other areas. I think that's something that I think about Bluestone. Like, did we really need to go to that market? Did we really need to extend? Maybe we should have just focused more in where we can really be dominant. Yeah. And, it'll be interesting to see.
Well, this topic, I want to ask you back to your partner's point. We don't have to get into the gory details, but this came up at in the course I teach with Len Schlesinger at HBS. How do you know when you need a partner, an equitized partner, or you need a seasoned employee who understands what they're doing in that space? Like, what is the litmus you go through in determining that you actually need a partner, and then what kind of partner do you need?
Well, I think what you should do is just like before you get married, you go on a few dates. I think that's how you should approach starting companies. If you're the founder, I think that you should get enough confidence through your own analysis and investment and education in your idea that you can feel confident leading it yourself, and then bring people in to help you along the way. Don't open the kimono on the first day. Just spend some time together, work through some challenges. Everyone thinks it's all great when the ball's bouncing your way, when the economic conditions are fantastic, or they're a great partner. But you learn the most when things are really rough, just like in a relationship. And I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways, because if you're the founder, realistically, very few people are going to work as hard and have as much emotional investment and mental investment in an idea than you. And I think people get, and I sort of fallen for this a few times, thinking that people are as passionate about Bluestone and the idea as me. And the reality is they're probably not. They're passionate, but not to the level that's quite often required as a founder. And we're talking about a level of investment that is 7 days a week, 24/7. And it's in many cases all consuming. I'm one of those founders that can't necessarily just switch it off and I don't have a business that enables that really in a very easily way. But I don't know, through your interviews with different people, Matt, and your experience, but I meet very few founders that don't literally live and breathe it every day, that can just isolate and compartmentalize their professional career, and then get on with something else and then come to it. But
that's why I tend to do. I always just do founder-driven concepts, because I think you cannot replicate that magic and intensity, right? Like, you can't just pick a company on the Dow and say, whatever, it's got a great return. Like, there's nothing like the energy of a founder who's, living or dying by the success of the company. But your point, to tease it out though, that relationship between partner and founder can become really tense, right? Because you are devoting your life to it, and you have an investor swooping in, probably like I do, like a pain in the ass every once in a while, make a random comment. You're like, I'm the one working fucking day and night, right? So it's like, you have to build it for the distance, and people make that decision, to your point, without any kind of data. And then next thing, I think over half the concepts I see have a failed partnership in it that could actually imperil the entire business. Isn't that interesting? And usually back to the beginning days.
Yeah, I think you've got to be really careful, and you learn a lot. And I think you also need to be realistic that if you do bring some co-founders in or partners, that they may play a vital role, but then they may transition out. And I think being mature enough to have those conversations early on would help you dramatically when the time does arrive, because people get disinterested, or the company outgrows them, or which is often a big challenge, is that you need to bring a more specialized person, or someone who's more experienced on top of them, which may then require a tremendous amount of self-awareness and selflessness for that partner to step stage left or step down. But picking growth, in our case, growth equity partners, and going with RSE, the diligence we did on each other was obviously very, very extensive.
Not going to tell them what I did to you, right? Psychologist. I like to get in the head. What's good? Take it out. Look at it.
But one of the most influential things for me was a phone call I had with Michael Astoria, who's the founder or co-founder and CEO of Van Pizza. And the advocacy unsolicitedly around how you've supported his business and the team and the challenges that they've had to deal with was a real inflection point in my external view on RSE. And I do think that that's really, really important with picking a partner, whether it's as someone operating and going to come in the business, or someone who's going to invest. And there's nothing better than having really frank, honest discussions with other founders or other CEOs, and to educate you and tell you the truth. Like, yeah, they've been great during the good times and the bad. Or, geez, when it gets tough, these guys have really tightened the screws, and they're not particularly empathetic. And I think that was wonderful for me. And there's no tougher time that most small businesses are going to experience than right now. In the case of Bluestone Lane, our revenue fell 90% in a week, and the fact that we've been able to rally and feel so galvanized and solidified with our team and our partners in RSC and some of our other investors has been incredible, because it could have gone the other way.
I don't want to gloss over what you've done, because I think it is really remarkable. So let's take it forward. You quit your job, you launch Bluestone, you scale it in February. Let's take as a data point. February, we're at 50 units, I think. Right? You're in New York, you're in Toronto, you're in all over California, right? Got a unit in Hong Kong, right? You're everywhere, right? Yeah. And then COVID hits, right? Yeah. So like you're right, and you're a cafe. You're not delivery focused, right? You're not, you know what I mean? You're probably like in the most vulnerable position. So how did you approach? I mean, I know because we worked on it together, but I think it's useful for everybody here, because I think you did a phenomenal job under fire. But how did you approach those early days?
Well, there's a couple of things that helped us. The fact that, and I don't know if this is well known by this audience, but you've got one of the all-time great sort of like sensory fear and panic radars I've ever met. When you sense that something's really gonna rough the sea up, like you're onto it. And you came to me very early saying COVID is huge. We need to start preparing for it. And I think the first time you commented, I was like, oh, no. And Matt being
those were lonely days for me, when I was like, it's just math. I can see the wave coming. I always say it's the consolation prize of my trauma as a child, that I'm very paranoid, and I'm usually pretty accurate. But
I shouldn't laugh, but
but I will say, lots of times there was nobody on the other end of the phone when I would have that conversation. You were meeting me lockstep, right? We were very prepared because of the conversations that we had in those early days, right?
Yeah, and I think what was really profound, if you may remember, we met in New York on March the 12th, and we had this. No, we didn't meet. We had a phone call. You couldn't come in to the office. You were working at home because there was someone who came down with a cold in your team,
right.
Or the partner
in the office. Yeah, we shut. Right.
So we had this phone call, and we talked about the phases which we'd mapped out. And at that stage, we had this good positive phone call. We agreed to implement phase 1. Now, by that weekend, I flew back to LA on Thursday night. We implemented phase 4. And then after the board meeting the next week, we implemented phase 5, which was something that we probably never thought was possible. But the reality of the situation and the stress to put the business up, it demanded such decisive and drastic action. It was incredibly heartbreaking and harrowing, the impact on our team, and we had to make decision very, very quickly on who has an essential role and who is going to try and keep some of our stores operational, because we knew that. And this was quite different from some of our peers. Let's take Blue Bottle, for example. Blue Bottle announced that they were going to close all their stores for 3 months. Internally, we wanted to keep some stores open as long as it didn't compromise anyone's health or put any undue risk on our team or our locals, for 3 main reasons. The first one was to preserve some jobs. Absolutely. We want to preserve some positions. The second one was we wanted to have some level of business continuity as a symbol of hope, and to reinforce our purpose to be our locals' genuine daily escape. So when you're holed up in your apartment in New York, getting outside for 10 minutes to get a coffee may be your only respite. It may be the only chance you get to see other people, or just to have some sense of freedom. And then thirdly, we wanted to contribute to the community. So by keeping the business going, keeping the roastery going, we were able to launch the Fuel for Heroes campaign and deliver 50,000 coffees across 30 hospitals, across 4 states, in which you also participated in that with Sarah. And that was amazing in galvanizing the team. Every member of our director or above did a coffee drop or worked in World Central Kitchen in Hudson Yards. And I do think that it was such an incredible, a sort of like a poetic notion that during crisis, when our business is falling apart, like we're diving so heavily into the community, because we always talked about being a pillar of the communities in which we operate. That's what a coffee shop is. It's a staple. And, that
so,
we just...
So you had 14 units that you tell everybody, because the operations are kind of fascinating, right? You go from one day of 50 units, right? You go down to 14, and then just talk through a little bit how you stayed open, because it was, and that's my point about founder driven. I don't think, if I'm talking right now, just being honest, to a CEO who had nothing to do with the foundation of the company necessarily, I'm not sure they're fighting for the simple idea of we want to be able to give people a respite, which is what you told me. And you said, I just want to keep as many jobs as I can. Right. Yeah. So to walk through those logistics of keeping those open. And
so this is where I'm so profoundly proud of the team. Like, given the resourcing that we stripped from the HQ team and from the field, we in 12 hours pivoted from regular walk-in, dine-in, table service in our cafes and walk in and order and chat to the barista at the POS in our coffee shops to completely contactless curbside pickup and delivery where it was less than 3% of the business to now where it's like 35% of the business. We did it in 12 hours, contactless. So from that point on, no one was allowed in the store. You couldn't order at the POS. The only way you could order was ordering ahead on our app. And then we onboarded all these 4 different delivery partners in 2 weeks. And we relaunched and invigorated our new loyalty program and went completely digital and mobile only. And we're seeing extraordinary results from a retention and what will translate into amazing LTV. So it has been this accelerator, because we talked about moving this way, and we were cashless since 2016, not for any other reason other than 90% of our transactions were cashless. So we were just adopting what our customers were saying, which was like, we want to use credit card, or we want to pay with the app, and we want it really fast, and we don't want to slow the line up or impact the experience through dealing with cash. But now where we're in a mobile only universe, our tech has stood up so well, and it's been so innately adopted. I'm very, very excited now about the future and the way that we're going to operate. And really, we're probably going to get there in 3 years, and we just condensed it in literally 3 days. And that's been incredible by the team, just to rally around one voice, one decision, and execute. And we pulled it off. We pulled it off.
No, I'm proud of you. We got so many questions for you, so I want to hit some of them, and we can weave in topics about the future. So, Sam, can you see that, Nick, or do you want me to just read it to you?
Yeah, I see Sam's.
There you go. All right, so perfect. How do you balance the investment behind retail, e-growth, and B2B? Well, Sam, you can sit at our board meeting right now, in front of everybody. And we can
just got the answers, Sam. Send them forward. Listen, I think this is a really interesting question, but we didn't really focus heavily on e-com and CPG and wholesale relative to retail, because retail, when you get it right, is such an immediate injection of revenue. To build $1 million in retail revenue is not that hard for us off of sort of base, if you get the store right and half right. E-com, to build a business from 0 to $1 million in e-com is really challenging. It's not easy.
People think it's so easy. Flip a switch. Your customer acquisition costs are upside down. It's crowded. It's, yep.
Yeah, and then it's third party versus organic, and how do you get the right amount of people to see you on Amazon? How do you deal with fulfillment? There's a lot of challenges. It's not. I think people talk about, I'm just going to be an online business. Well, it's not that. It might seem iterative and it might seem linear, but it's not. It's incredibly challenging, and it's very expensive. And you can have a lot of enthusiasm and generate $10,000 in sales a week. Well, that's $500,000, right? Where a retail store opens strongly, it can generate $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a week. Now, I think that's one of the challenges when you've got a retail brand that's working, that constantly the pull into the core part of the business because the revenue is so much higher and maybe it's a faster way to profitability. But what COVID has taught us is the need for diversification, the need to have a relationship that is omni-channel, that extends beyond our four walls. And we're very lucky that we've invested in our 360 customer view, that now we can aggregate a single profile on whether you engage with us in the store, at our coffee shops, when you eventually make reservations and order in our cafes, and also what you buy online with us. We can then aggregate all transactions, all spend, put it through the loyalty program, change your tiering, and really ensure that we can reward you, and in some cases, like, surprise you through the aggregation of that data and that customer view. And that's really exciting for us. And that's why we feel it's so important to continue to invest in e-com, in grocery, which we're very, very early on, and wholesale relationships.
But Nick, isn't that the kind of the aperture that opened up as a result of COVID? Which is, look at Starbucks, right? Starbucks did a phenomenal job cultivating a loyalty and order ahead, to the envy of anybody in fast casual and the food business. Nobody did it better. Those who took advantage of this opportunity to pivot to all digital, when we emerge, it'll be a contactless world, right? Where everything will be digital, and even payment transactions will be a tremendous bias. That would otherwise have taken years to probably build. And now, virtually overnight, you have, I know others have too. It's not just us, right? But you will emerge from the crisis, I assume, now with a deep database and a one-to-one customer with your customer that you didn't with a relationship with your customer that you didn't have before, right? And
yeah, I think it has been such a tragedy, and it's profoundly impacted us negatively from an economic point of view. But there are an incredible amount of silver linings. What you've learned about your team, what you learn about your customer, and the way that you accelerated innovation. That you can, when it can't get any lower, it couldn't get any worse. You've got no fear anymore. Or you can abandon any sort of caution or hesitation. You can just rapid prototype and trial, and that's been so invigorating to know that, hey, just give it a go. Let's just trial and test and see if it works in 2 days. Let's just go contactless. We're going to tell everyone we're going to keep a few stores open. The only way that you can order is via the app, order ahead, and you collect from a certain position. You'll have no interaction with our team. Let's see how it works, and let's try it with a sample of 13 stores, 14 stores. And that's how we pivoted. We were like, let's try it, and then learn and respond. And
you have an interesting personality profile, because you have seen, and otherwise others would have crumbled. 90% of your business is closed down overnight. We were dealing with some serious weighty problems, but you sort of were invigorated by the fact that it gave a chance to experiment. You dealt with the loss at first, right? But quickly bounced back, and I think that's important for anybody out there, right? Yeah, you have to seek out the silver linings. What other option do you have but other than to succumb, right? And so there was a little shaming in the beginning for anybody talking about opportunity. And I feel really passionate about this. Like, we have a responsibility and obligation to pick ourselves back up and rebuild the country. Right. And the more we talk about that, the more we bolster each other up and say, no, there is opportunity coming out of it, the faster that we'll do it. Right. And I feel really strongly, and you quickly embraced that experimentation phase. And as a result, I think long-term, you're going to be okay. And had you not embraced that and we shut everything down, I don't know what Bluestone looks like coming out of this.
Yeah, I think that's right. And like, I'm so fortunate to have a fantastic grounding family and amazing team. And I think, we adopted, I think early on I was down. I couldn't believe that this was happening. And we'd had an enormous 12 months with ups and downs and opportunities and things, dissipating. And I think we were really getting a good space with the team, and we'd obviously been working on this retail leader and the hire for a long, long time, and we finally get the right person. But I immediately switched my mentality from some advice from my mum and from my wife, Alex, who said, like, there's going to be silver linings. There's going to be something out there that you can salvage. There's going to be learnings. And I think we just rallied all around it, looking for the positivity, assuming good intent, and bringing back that optimism. And that change in attitude suddenly invigorated everybody, and I fed off their energy, and I surrounded myself with people who are believers in humanity, believer in the business. And also I think that it was really humbling with Fuel for Heroes to realize, though, no matter what sort of challenges that you're faced with professionally or personally, at a stay-at-home order, like imagine those on the front line, imagine those who have lost someone, never had a chance to say goodbye to their grandfather or their father or a partner, and I just realized that we've got to keep this in perspective. This is we can find a way through this. We have to be really decisive. We have to have incredibly frank discussions with those that are stakeholders like landlords, and we've got to find common ground and a way forward. And adopting that approach, I think, gave us a chance to and solidified our belief we're going to get through it. And I'm in nothing but admiration for those that really have got us through it, being the first responders, the delivery men, the essential workers, and obviously our healthcare heroes, because no one's done it as tough as them. And also, the families that have been directly impacted. And, once you change your mindset and realize that, hey, for all your issues, they're not as great as someone else, I think you start to feel more comfortable with the situation you're in and focus on attacking and how can I learn and get these silver linings and liberate for the future.
I want to take 2 more questions. So we got one up right there from Ben Fenton. You want to take that?
Okay. This one's like, how do you balance crazy passion with business, rational decision making, especially when you surround yourself with fit? Okay. So, well, I think you want to have a team that is objective as possible, and everyone has different personality traits. Hopefully you have common values. That's essential, but everyone has different strengths and different experiences. I think you got to surround yourself by, an eclectic group of people that some will be your energizers, some will be your challengers and your doubters, and some that just have unbridled enthusiasm, some that have a lot of experience. And I think asking questions and talking, and that's the way that I like to process and lead. I love vocalizing. I love chatting about it openly. I love throwing out crazy ideas and seeing the reaction and seeing if it stick. And I think I'm so grateful with our relationship, Matt, that, we text or we chat, and sometimes it's just, completely off the wall, but it's sometimes like really exciting to go to like one extreme and then discuss the other extreme and find a way where it could actually be implemented. And, but ultimately, like a lot of this comes down to how you as a founder feel about the situation. It's hard to disintermediate that intuition. If you look at the great entrepreneurs, they have data and they have, some other points, but a lot of the time they have a vision and they have a feeling that this is the way it's meant to be conveyed. This is the way it's meant to look. This is the emotional response, or this is how it's going to benefit our customer. And I think if you look at Branson and you look at Steve Jobs and Musk, these guys, like they had it clear in their head. And they may not have had everything worked out, but they knew and they forced the group behind them. Like, this is the direction we're pushing in. And even if you don't see it is naturally right now, I have the confidence and the validation internally that this is the right thing for us to do. And I think that that's a critical role of the founders. Sometimes say, no, this is what we're doing because I know that this is the right thing. Because often, through that intuition, you've got to this point now where you actually have a team and you have an investor or you've built a customer base. So.
And I think to add on to that, we've had this conversation too. I think it's important vis-a-vis founders when you're entering a space that you really don't know, it's a new industry and it's the first time you're running this kind of business. Sometimes we don't know what standard to hold ourselves to. And that we've had this conversation, right? You have to give yourself permission to not be an expert in everything, but you are going to hold yourself accountable to finding the experts and holding them accountable, right? That's the number one skill set you have to cultivate is identify talent, be able to recruit them, be able to hold them accountable, and then move on if you need to, right? And I think that always takes a little bit of time when somebody launches a company. Like you sort of feel that you have to be expert and know everything, and then you eventually settle and be like, no, it's okay. I just need to hire the best, right? Like Tom, all right, you went through this, right? You were operating all these units. We got a killer operator now in Tom. It's okay. You operate the unit, right? I mean, it takes It takes time to sort of get there. And then the second point about the conversation of passion, you want a combination of people who are obviously, everybody's got to have some fire, but you want, obviously you need some hard skills and practical skills. But one rule I have, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, no energy vampires, right? I just don't want anybody who, and an energy vampire in my mind is somebody who has a negative bias and is usually looking to pull somebody down rather than lift them up. Like, that's the one thing I just expect of everybody. Like, try to lift them up at least, or at least step in the foxhole. And if there's a train coming, walk in front of it, right? Like, and so I can't stand energy vampires anywhere around me.
No, I think humility is such an underrated value. And like in Australia, like we talk about this a lot. Like in Australia, like the people's champion, the champion that doesn't grandstand or showboat is the most respected. And I think humility, empathy, in our game, like in hospitality, there's sort of no IQ, right? Everything's EQ, right? There's no intellectual property that's so advanced or so technical. It's about ensuring that your team, the people as they form the team, work well and execute and know their role and do it really professionally and support each other. And I think you're right. You need we talked about in a bit of a crude way and it was adopted from a sporting team, an AFL team that was very successful. It didn't have the best list, didn't have the all the stars, but continue to find ways to win. And they had this policy they used to refer to as like a no dickhead policy, and it was essentially that. Like, they want good people with the right values, with the right commitment, with the positivity, the empathy, the humility, the assumed good intent. And they wanted to be part of it as a group. And that's just so critically important. And because I do think culture eats strategy for breakfast. I think that, you can inject specialists into your business to help. But how do you ever replace like a unified team, a culture that knows that they're going to prevail, that they've got that grit and persistence to get through the challenges, and the self-awareness to realize that, hey, I don't know how to execute this, or I don't know how to go into this line of business. I need to bring in those resources. And, it's for me to keep quiet and listen rather than talk. And it's a valuable skill. Yeah.
Let's do one more question, because I know you love this topic. I don't know how much of your trade secrets you want to give away, but what are some of the internal technologies you've implemented to build a data-driven hospitality stack?
So we started making sort of more significant tech investments early last year. We built a data warehouse and we started to work with third parties on putting in an engine to capture as much as we can into that sort of repository. We've gone a slightly different approach from some brands that are of similar scale, size. Some have gone out and built their own proprietary technology, which has a high sort of risk return profile. It can work and be such a huge competitive sort of moat and barrier of entry. We decided to leverage third party, aggregate them together using technical sort of teams, and then use custom UX and our own proprietary on the UX side. And we had the view, and this is me, that if we want to go and build something, by the time that it's done, and after you look at the return on capital, there's probably a better technology off the shelf. Like, the rate of adoption and iteration and development was so fast that I never felt comfortable like going out and building it ourselves. So what we invested in is knitting it all together. And we're not perfect, but what's happened is COVID has accelerated that knitting process. And as I talked about earlier, like that 360 view, like that's something that's really exciting. And a brand of our sort of scale in coffee that has 50 units, I don't really think anyone's got it. That they know whether you dine in a coffee shop, in a cafe, you order a coffee online, or husk gluten-free bread online, that you've got a coffee subscription. We can see it all through one. And the customer, our local, can actually log on and see all the transactions, see their loyalty status, see how it's all contributed. So, I think it's a balance, because, it's so easy to get enamored by just spending more and more and more on tech. And right now you need to, but you can't do it to the point where you're going to sink the business and put yourself in, an insolvency issue. And for us, we realized it'd be better for us to spend time on knitting off the shelf sort of technologies and then investing in sort of custom UX, then building it from scratch.
I think people would be horrified to hear just how little money you spent. Shout out to Liam, by the way, on your team, because if he heard this and we don't mention, great job. But I think what you said is a great point, and I had a bias in the other direction. You're the one who sort of pushed me in this direction, right? I presumed we need this massive infrastructure and have to spend all this money, and you were like, no, we can patch it together. And did something that is good as anybody out there. I would argue the top, companies, and created something just as good, as valuable, and as easy to use for a fraction of the cost. Which anybody out there, don't allow your tech team or anybody else to convince you. You have to do the research. Just because you don't know how to do coding yourself doesn't mean you can't figure it out. But Nick, I want to end on this topic. So we have 20 units in New York, roughly, right?
Yeah, 23.
23. Yep. The hardest hit city on earth. Right, is basically where the core of your entire business is. What does brunch look like in July in New York City, from where you sit?
Well, I'm excited by the fact that there will be brunch in July, that people will be able to dine in. That's going to be a tremendous achievement, and I think something that should be celebrated. It will be outside, I think, only. Which is great. The climate and season's supportive of it, and it will be on a more capacity constrained basis. So we will require reservations in advance, and you will order your brunch from your phone. You will be greeted by a concierge who checks you in, undertakes the required health protocols and checks, which may include temperature. Certainly, we're adopting full contact tracing to know who comes in and who comes out for our own health and welfare of our team, and also those who are also dining with us. And you will then order from your phone. All the transaction we process from your phone, and it'll be more intimate who you're dining with, because you'll certainly have more space. And it'll be a hopefully a great experience. It's going to be all technology enabled. There won't be table service. There won't be a lot of human connection, with the exception of the concierge service that's going to welcome you and seat you. And I think it's a new world, but people, I believe, are going to be really excited about the ability to dine outside. And we're very fortunate that we have some iconic locations. 2 in DC that have extraordinarily large outdoor dining areas. We've got obviously Upper East Side on 5th Avenue and 90th opposite the park. We have one of the best spots in West Village. So I'm pretty excited, because so much of the Bluestone business was centered around alfresco dining outside with friends. And we're in a position to be able to provide that. And it'll actually start commencing shortly. DC has brought forward their opening to tomorrow, so you can actually serve people outside for dine in, but outside the premises, which is really exciting. So we'll be looking to activate within the next sort of 7 to 10 days. We'll sit and wait for a week and see how some of the others execute and sort of learn, and then quickly follow. And that's going to be exciting. And I think everyone's going to be probably hanging in for those moments. And our team will be ready. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I for one cannot wait to be back there. That's my weekend tradition. I can't wait to get a Rainbow Bowl, or in bad days get the egg wrap that you have. But depending on my mood. But I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of the team, and I'm so excited that we're going to be back at it. The amazing thing is, I'm sitting here listening to what you went through and what the company's gone through. I can't imagine anything worse. So I assume like it only gets better. We've been dedicated, and we're still here doing a LinkedIn live, and you're still smiling. So kudos to you. Everyone get your Bluestone out there. It's I think the best coffee. Completely biased, but it is phenomenal. And
it's a good product from someone that did not come from coffee background. Like, and I'm, as you know, what I'm like, I'm brutally candid at times. We really did put the authentic flat white on the map, and really the avocado smash, right? We introduced it in New York, and it's fantastic that it's a staple on sort of every brunch menu now. But if you haven't tried it, give it a go. And
you're better try avocado if you're the one person in the world who hasn't had an avocado.
But one closing comment is certainly around supporting small business, whether it's Bluestone or other small businesses. They're the most disproportionately hit. They're those who have very limited access to capital, often owned by a family member who's put in tremendous blood, sweat, and tears and financial resourcing. And so if people are out there and they're thinking about rallying behind restaurants, rallying behind small consumer product brands, like I implore you to really think about shopping small, because they're the ones that are going to need it, and they're going to need the revenue immediately once they open. Otherwise, there's a real risk that they could fail in the first couple of months, and we don't want that. They're the cosmopolitan fabric of all these amazing cities, and no more sort of pertinent than New York City, the truly the world city, and arguably the culinary capital of the world. So get out there and support and shop local.
I'm going to leave on that, Nick. Incredibly well said. I'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody. Great session. I'll talk to you soon, Nick.
Thanks, Chuck.
Take care.
Mate.